Hello everyone, Generation Y Conservative here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the next candidate in line after Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. It's Marco Rubio, so stick around. For a while now, after Rand Paul dropped out, Marco Rubio has actually been my second favorite choice. You know, in my last video on Ted Cruz, I mentioned that Marco Rubio was among three candidates that I knew were unwavering in their faith. The other two were Dr. Ben Carson and Ted Cruz himself. I want to take a moment to look at some of the positives and accomplishments of Marco Rubio. Rubio has a history in the Senate of fighting for human rights around the world, specifically in Venezuela and Cuba.
There's no U.S. embargo on Venezuela. There's no economic sanctions on Venezuela that they can blame on us or anyone else. It's due simply and entirely to the mismanagement and incompetence of Nicolás Maduro, the clown that runs that country, and the thugs that surround him in his gangster-style government. Venezuela is ostensibly, they portray themselves to be a democracy, but in reality they're not. The court system is completely controlled by the government of Maduro. The elections are constantly manipulated by the government of Maduro. There is no freedom of the press. For example, the government gets unlimited hours on television to talk about whatever they want. The opposition gets virtually none.
Rubio co-authored the Economic Growth and Family Fairness Tax Plan, along with Mike Lee, a staunch conservative that stands virtually alone besides Rand Paul and Ted Cruz in the Senate. One of the more interesting things I found was that Marco Rubio actually proposed legislation to help combat student loans. He came up with an alternative to that. His idea was to allow private investors and organizations to get involved in investing into individuals' student loans that could be paid back over time as they get employed with a certain percentage of what they make. At least it's an interesting idea. You could see that it would be a risk to the investors because if the person doesn't get a job, they're not getting their money back. And if they do get the job, they're getting paid back based on the percentage of their earned income. So if they're making a lot out of college, they're going to get a good percentage back. If they're making a little bit, they're going to get a little bit back. But that plays out over time instead of having to pay back a certain amount every month like you do with student loans currently. You know, Rubio in the Senate is considered one of the brightest minds in regards to foreign affairs and security issues. You might have actually seen that in some of the debates where he has schooled some of the other candidates on foreign issues like Iran, Russia, or even ISIS and what they stand for.
Let me first describe Iran because they're not just a normal nation state, and we have no quarrel with the Iranian people. But the Iranian leader, their supreme leader, is a radical Shia cleric who has an apocalyptic vision of the future. He views himself not simply as the leader of Iran, but as the leader of all Muslims, all Shia Muslims on the planet. And they have a desire not simply to conquer the Middle East and to become the dominant power in that region, but ultimately to be able to hold America hostage.
Now, where Rubio falls out of grace quickly is with his involvement with the Gang of Eight bill. This bill that he co-authored would create a pathway to citizenship and amnesty, if you will, for illegal immigrants that came into this country. But why is that exactly a big problem? Well, the biggest problem with that is that Tea Party members actually backed Rubio and helped get him into the Senate seat. Among the promises that he made the Tea Party was that he would not do anything to create a pathway to citizenship for people that have come here illegally. As soon as he got in, he virtually turned around right away and slapped the Tea Party in the face by putting his name on this legislation almost immediately. The second reason is that overall it hurts the immigration process. One of the biggest liberal sticking points as arguments against conservatives is that we're against immigration. We as conservatives happen to agree that immigration helped build this country into what it is. It's not that we're against immigration, it's that we're against illegal immigration. I happen to know a couple friends of mine that came through the process in recent years the legal way. What they have concerns over is the fact that they went through the process, followed American law, stood and waited in lines. They went through the process online. In some cases, it can take years to get through that process. And maybe that's something that we need to take a look at. Maybe we need to streamline that process. But what has them upset is that people come into this country illegally, breaking American laws and bypassing them in the system through loopholes to gain citizenship, before they're granted their citizenship. Are these the type of people that we want in this country? Are these the type of people that we want to be citizens? People that already broke the law in getting into this country? Or should we be looking at the people that followed the rules and came into this country legally? You know, studies over the last decade have shown that people that are here illegally and getting paid under the table illegally have sent a good portion of their money that's untaxed back to their home countries. And this isn't just a Mexican problem. This is a problem for people that come from all around the world. That money is then leaving the American economy for good and going towards other economies. And it wasn't taxed, so the American economy gains no benefit from that money at all. You know, poor Marco fell victim to the attacks of Donald Trump quite often. One of the nicknames that he was given was Little Marco. This was the fall of Rubio in recent weeks because he got down into the mud with Donald Trump and started slinging the mud back at him. Marco started referring to Donald Trump's small hands, which was also inferring that something else might be small too. But at least Marco Rubio gave us an out with parents by saying, if he has small hands, you know what that means, that you can't trust him. But then Donald Trump took that obviously a step further in the last debate and said,
he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Let me tell you something, I'm a big winner down there. Maybe that's not exactly what he said, but that's what he was inferring. So he actually started referring to his private size, whereas Marco Rubio at least gave it a little bit of humor to say that you can't trust him. You know, when I happened to be at CPAC 2 weeks ago, one of the things that Marco Rubio said on stage when he was being interviewed in the question and answer session, the reporter looked at him and said, "Why is it that you have stooped to the level of Donald Trump now and started slinging insults back?" And he said this.
I can tell you this, where I grew up, if someone keeps punching people in the face, eventually someone's going to have to stand up and punch them back.
You know, over the last week, you could see that it's really worn on Marco Rubio's conscience because he's a man of faith, that he took these personal attacks towards Donald Trump. He's apologized on a couple occasions, and I think that he really means it.
You know, I'd do it differently. I really would. And the reason, my kids were embarrassed by it. My wife didn't like it. I don't think it reflects good. That's not who I am. That's not what my campaign is going to be about or will ever be about again. Yeah, I'd do it differently. I would. On the personal stuff. I'm not telling you he didn't deserve it. I'm not telling you he didn't deserve it. But that's not who I am. And that's not what I want to be. And I honestly want to be a good example. I want my kids to be proud of me. And I don't think it reflected well on my faith. And so I felt bad about that.
Unfortunately for Marco Rubio, there's only one path to the presidency, and that's through a brokered convention. This is a horrible idea for Marco Rubio for one big reason, and that's that voters feel that their votes don't matter anymore anyway. So if you take someone like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, if they get the majority of the votes and the Republican Party changes the rules at the convention, because they can change all the rules at the convention itself, and give it to someone like Marco or John Kasich, then the voters feel that their votes didn't matter anyway. We're already dealing with that problem with Bernie Sanders and the superdelegates that have been going to Hillary Clinton. So now we're going to deal with it on both sides, and the GOP voters and the Democrat voters feel like none of their votes matter. You're looking at pretty big civil unrest on both sides if we go through with that. In the meantime, Marco Rubio and John Kasich are taking votes from Ted Cruz towards the end result of them being head-to-head. And the reason why I say that is because you either love or hate Donald Trump. If you love Donald Trump, then you're already voting for him. If you don't like him, then you're voting for Marco Rubio or John Kasich. Statistically speaking, I would say that 90% of their votes would be going to Ted Cruz then. 10% is up in the air and could go to Donald Trump, but it also could go to Ted Cruz. With every day that Marco Rubio and John Kasich stay in this race, they're virtually ensuring that Trump takes the presidency. Rubio, you're a good guy. You seem like a great man of faith. You've made some mistakes in the past, but for the good of this country, don't let Trump take this presidency. Back out now, or at least back out after you lose Florida, because you statistically can't win unless you go to brokered convention, and it's a horrible idea for this country. Your reputation is already tarnished because of the Gang of Eight bill. Don't let it be further tarnished that you were attached to the win of Donald Trump taking that presidency seat because you allowed the voters to keep on voting for people that weren't going to win instead of going to a candidate that could go head-to-head with him. You know, I'm personally begging of you to bow out graciously now so that you could back Ted Cruz and bring this country back together. It would unite the country. We can't keep on playing on the anger of the American people, and I know that you and Ted Cruz and John Kasich haven't been playing on the anger. You've been playing on the hope of what we can accomplish with this country by going towards these certain principles. This is the time to back out. Click over here to subscribe to my YouTube channel, or over here to look at my analysis of Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned because next time we're going to be looking at John Kasich. It never goes down.